Hello, I'm going to do a quick review of the characteristics of life from the slide presentation in class. In order for something to be considered alive, it has to have all of the following characteristics. So biology is the study of things that were alive, or things that are alive, or things that were once alive. For example, fossils. Fossils are not currently alive, but at one point in time, they were. So if we want to study the history of biological diversity, then we can look at fossils. So biology is the study of things now living or that were once alive. So let's go through the characteristics of life. The first characteristic of life is that all living things are made up of one or more cells. There are eukaryotic cells, which are complex and have membrane-bound organelles, such as a nucleus, a Golgi apparatus, all of those organelles that we will review in cell biology. Eukaryotic cells can be single-celled organisms, though usually they're not, but an example would be a paramecium. A paramecium, which is shown here on this slide, is a single-celled organism that is eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles, so prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, and a great example of that would be bacteria. So prokaryotic cells are single-celled organisms. So all organisms are made up of one or more cells. So you can try to think of something that's alive that you know of that's not made up of cells, and I don't think you will be able to come up with anything. This is called cell theory. Now, it is possible that at some point in time we may discover some type of life that is not made up of cells, maybe on a different planet, or somewhere here on Earth, but as of this point, we have never discovered something alive that's not made up of cells. So that's number one. Number two is that all living things display organization. So an example of organization, say for a human being, would be the smallest unit of organization would be cells. So say I have a heart. So if you wanted to take one of my heart cells, like scrape one single cell off and look at it under a microscope, you could do that. You could have one single cell. So they're cells. If you take those cells and put them together, they make tissue. So if you took a chunk of heart tissue because you needed to check it for some reason and looked at it under a microscope, then a bunch of cells together would be tissue. If you take all of my heart tissue and put it together, you get an organ, which is the heart. So you've got cells, tissues, if you organize them together, you get an organ. And then if you put multiple organs together, you get what's called an organ system. So say my heart, my veins, my arteries, that would all be the circulatory system. And then if you put a lot of organ systems together, say a digestive system, an integumentary system, which is a fancy way of saying your skin, your digestive system, your respiratory system, all of these things together, and you get an organism. So cells are the most basic. Cells together make up tissues. Tissues together make up organs. Organs organized together make up organ systems. And organ systems organized together make up organisms. So that's organization. Oh, and there's a picture of it. Cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organism. The next thing that all living organisms must have is that they must grow and develop. So growth and development are similar, but they're not exactly the same. Growing means getting bigger. So in this classic example of a tadpole to a frog is bigger than a tadpole. The tadpole grows. If you think of a human example, a human baby is much smaller than a human adult. A human baby grows. When something's growing, it just gets more cells. So as an adult, or as a teenager, your cells are not larger than the cells of a newborn baby. You just have more of them. So that is growing. Developing is something that's similar, but developing means to be changing over time. So for example, with a human example, if you took a baby and you just made them bigger, say I took a picture of a baby and I projected it up onto the wall as an adult size, would that look like an adult human being? It would not. The proportions would be all wrong because you develop. Not only do you get bigger, but you change. Babies have much bigger foreheads. They have much bigger heads compared to their arms and their legs. They don't look exactly like an adult who's been shrunk down. And the same with a tadpole to a frog. A tadpole does not look like just a tiny frog. It has a tail, its legs are developing, so it's developing. The next thing is that all living things must reproduce. They have to be able to produce offspring and that can pass on traits. Now this one I get questions about. It can be a little bit tricky because someone asked me, what about a liger, which is a lion and a tiger, and a liger cannot reproduce. So there are always a few exceptions in biology, but I would think of this as that the species that an organism belongs to has to be able to reproduce and pass their traits on. For example, there are some human beings that are not able to reproduce for biological reasons. They're still alive because the human species can still reproduce. So lions can reproduce, tigers can reproduce, and the liger is not its own species. So the species that you're a part of has to be able to reproduce. Response to stimuli. So organisms must be able to respond to their environments. Right here, there's a picture of a gazelle that's running from a cheetah. So that's a really obvious response. But also, the response may not be something that's obvious to you. For an example, a plant. If you put a plant into a windowsill and it's straight up over a period of time, that plant will start to lean towards the light source. That plant is responding to the stimuli of sunlight in its environment. So it might be happening slower than what you can see, but it is still happening. Plus there are the tickle me plants, or they're sold that way, that you can touch and the plant leaves will fold up. So plants respond to stimuli. All living organisms require energy, which this is referencing food. So as human beings, we have to eat our food. Plants and other organisms that can photosynthesize can make their own food from sunlight. Some single-celled organisms can just absorb food through endocytosis or through diffusion through their cell membrane, but all living things require energy. The next one is maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis means keeping stable internal conditions. And hopefully you learned about this in middle school, so this should be a review for you. But homeostasis, a great example, is your body temperature. So your body wants to maintain a stable internal temperature. So if you start to get too hot, then you are going to start sweating, which is what's being shown in this picture. That sweat, as it evaporates, will cool your body down. It'll bring you back into a healthy temperature range. If you get really, really cold, you will start shivering. Your body is taking food energy, converting it into mechanical energy by making you move, which then releases heat and starts to warm you up. So the classic example of this, which is not a biology example, is a thermostat on an air conditioner. If you set your air conditioner to 70 degrees, it has a thermometer that's measuring the temperature. Within a narrow range, let's say maybe when it gets to 71 degrees, your air conditioner will detect that the temperature is getting out of range, and so it will tell your air conditioning unit to turn back on. And the air conditioner is going to turn back on and blow cold air until the temperature drops back down to 70 or maybe even 69. Again, there may be a little range, at which point the sensor who's monitoring the temperature will realize we're back into zone and will turn the air conditioner off. Your body does the same thing in terms of your biochemistry, in terms of the pH of your blood, the temperature of your body, all of these things. Your body maintains homeostasis, stable internal conditions. And then, yes, this is the last one, adaptations that evolve over time. So populations of organisms will adapt. So if you go and look at organisms around the planet that are alive, you will find that they are very highly adapted to their environment. So that is the last characteristics of life. So adaptations that evolve over time, maintaining homeostasis, requiring energy, responding to stimuli, reproducing, or at least being part of a species that reproduces, growing and developing, displaying organization, and this is our great example from cells up to organisms, and being made up of one or more cells. In order for something to be considered alive, it has to have all of those characteristics. If it is missing any of them, then it is not considered alive. And an example of that would be viruses. Viruses, which can make you sick, they can infect you, are not considered alive. Bacteria, which are single-celled organisms, bacteria, which are single-celled organisms, are considered alive. You can take antibiotics to fight infections. However, viruses, like what causes the common flu, are not considered alive. The reason, they behave a lot like living organisms, but they are not able to reproduce themselves. They land on another cell, depending on the type of virus, but they land on a cell, they inject their own RNA or DNA into that cell, and then they hijack that cell's equipment and basically trick the cell into reproducing their DNA. So the viruses in and of themselves are not able to reproduce, and technically speaking, the body of a virus is not actually a cell. And there's some controversy about it, but it's really technically not made up of one or more cells. So viruses are not considered alive.